Today we're going to talk about session objectives, and as you can see there, how to develop and understand the role of a budget. And it's very important that when you're doing a budget that you try to be as accurate as you can. Okay, so I'm not going to read those things because you guys have a handout, and so we have so much, and we're so excited that we have so much to talk to you about. So I'm just going to go through those slides, and we're going to understand the principles and the guide to develop acceptable budgets, because our office get all kind of budgets. So we want to make sure that you leave here today with the right skills that you need to make sure that your budget is accurate as possible. Today's agenda, for people that are using the Zoom, you can type into the link for VPRGS, and you can get the handouts of what we're going through today. And we're going to talk about why budgets matter, why they're important, the resource and tools that you need, and some very important budgeting tips when you're trying to work through that process. We're going to feel free to ask some questions as we're talking, because that's how you're going to learn, with some real life changing questions that you have, that maybe some things that you're working on today, and really just making the process flow very fluently for you. And think about some things that you're dealing with now that you've been wanting to ask but didn't know who to ask. You have two people in here who can do that for you, okay?
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, so I run the pre-award office in the College of Natural Science. And so my office, what I wanted to talk about is how to work with your pre-award office, or if you don't have one, how you would work with OSP. So the biggest thing is notify them early, and I cannot stress that enough. You know in advance you're submitting a grant. You've known for months you were going to submit a grant, and there are things that you could be working on with your department at the same time. So let them know early. Give them the solicitation and make sure you read it yourself. Very important that you read it so you understand everything that needs to go into that proposal, because they'll throw you a loop every time. And let your people know, all of the project personnel who are going to be involved. Is it a collaborative proposal? Are you a subaward? Who is the lead? Are there subawards? With whom are the subawards? Or perhaps you're going to be the subaward on somebody else's grant. And communication. Just make sure you're staying in contact with them so that you're moving things along.
And I want to point out, since I work for central administration, some of you guys may not have a pre-award office within your department or college. So you're on your own building your budget. So then what you want to do is talk with us. If you don't have, as soon as you know that this is something that you want to apply to, you may not have your budget ready, you may not have anything ready, but you know that you want to apply to something, okay? Soon as you know, let us know, that we can get on your radar, because we can remind you of notification. Because what you're going to do is, when you're contacting our office, you're going to want to give us a solicitation, because how did you find out about the opportunity? Someone told you. And so if you do that research to make sure you have a solicitation. And we also call a solicitation an RFP. It's the same thing. So as soon as you know, let us know, and then we can work together to make sure that that proposal is turned in on time and is the best of your ability. In our office, we do realize that you're trying to do your technical piece of it. We're here to help you get that financial piece, okay? So even if you think that you're bothering us, I want you to know it's not a bother.
Never.
What our goal is to get it funded, okay? So if we have enough time to go through all the nooks and crannies, we can tell you guys some things, because we do it all the time. And all of us in the office, we're experienced. We deal with all agencies. Not one person deals with just one agency. So we're cross-trained. So we can help you with the different agencies, okay? So I just want to point that out. So like the last bullet here says communicate. It's so important. And so many times we have faculty who tell our office, we would have emailed you, but we just didn't have all the pieces yet. That's okay. Just let us know when you got one piece.
Or we didn't email you because we weren't even sure we were really going to move forward with it. If you think you're going to move forward, let us know, because it's no problem at all then for us to say, if you say, oh, we've decided we can't submit, no problem. We move on. So we're not upset with you in any way if that happens.
That's right. Why is the budget relevant to you? The budget helps you to what? Guide and scope your project. There's so many times that when our office gets a budget, sometimes there are things in that budget that really shouldn't be, okay? And that's why we're here. We're the second set of eyes for you. When we're talking to you, we're not trying to say, you can't do this, you can't do that. We just know We want your project because you've worked so hard. We don't want to be kicked out of the review process because you missed a step. We have those eyes to do that. So when we're doing that, we're on the same team. We want your projects to be successful. We want to make sure that MSU is funded. We want to keep that money coming in. So you want to make sure if your budget is too low for the amount of work that you do, we're going to say, hey, I know this is not our field, it's yours. So have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And so when we're doing that, we're not trying to tell you how to do your work because we know you're all professionals and you're all skilled in your areas, but we're skilled on the proposal side to help you get your project funded, okay? If your budget is too high, then your funding request may be perceived as unreasonable. And so a lot of times I may say, hey, have you thought about this? Because I looked online, I see these pieces of supplies doesn't cost that much. I'm not trying to tell you how you're doing your job. I'm just trying to tell you what the reviewers are going to look at. The budget should not be a distraction. So many times our office gets a lot of different things that really shouldn't be in the budget. And so what we do is we compare. That's why we ask you, when you let us know that you're going to be doing a proposal, we ask you for a copy of the RFP, because in that solicitation, it has a list of what's unallowable that maybe you didn't catch because you're concentrating on the technical piece, which is what you're supposed to do. We're here to help you.
No, you're not bound.
Guiding principles.
Right in the center. If you can be in the center for right now.
Guiding principles. Okay. When you're preparing your budget, what we're looking at, we want to make sure that it's allowable, reasonable, and allocable. That's the three most important things that we're looking at in your budget. Because we're spending taxpayer money. So we want to make sure that we're doing the best of our ability to make sure that we are in compliance for the government and for MSU. And so the link that's provided here gives you definitions, gives you some things that may be unallowable. And so if you don't have a pre-award office and you don't want to contact our office because it could be on a Saturday when you're building your budget or a Sunday, you can go to that link. And that link will be very helpful for you, what's allowable and not. And they're going to keep on talking about allowable, reasonable, and allocable, okay? Typical categories of a budget.
I think I'm on. We kind of split this up a bit, so we're not all, one of us isn't just a talking head through the whole thing. So your typical categories are your personnel, your equipment, your travel, and then what they call other direct costs, which is going to include your supplies, publication costs, consultants, subcontracts, grad student tuition and fees, animal costs, and services. Okay? You have a clicker. All right. So, salaries. Always a big thing when we're trying to do things. So we're going to actually do a quick demo of the budget builder for you, which is the tool we currently have that helps us decide budget, to help us come up with the salaries and figure out what we should do. Budget builder helps us blend those salaries. So we give it a date. We tell it the start date. We tell it the start date. And the month and the year we want to start, and then we look people up, and then it'll blend the salaries, including those October 1st raises that are usually given to people. It'll blend it and it'll tell you what the salary is. It'll tell you then the fringes as well. So if someone's on an annual appointment, it will give you the information for annual. And if someone's in a summer appointment, an academic year appointment, it'll give you both the academic year and the summer information that you might need. So this is one of our faculty in our college was good enough to let us use his information from a few years ago. So we've just kind of kept it there, but we're looking at, so basically in these budgets, we're going to put in their names, we're going to tell it to calculate, we're going to put in our salary percent that we're looking at. Sometimes you're going to some people use a 2% increase. Typically it's a 3% that my office uses, unless we know it should be something else. And it will go ahead and give us the projected salary and the projected fringe. You can go in and you can put the effort percent on the project, or person months in, and it will calculate what the actual amount will be. So in the first line that we have here, this is an annual appointment that we put in, which is the salary, same salary as this person. But we have it as 12 months. You can see that the fringe rate over there ends up being the same for the 12-month appointment. With academic year faculty, their fringes are all covered in the 9 months. And then in the summertime, we only pay FICA 7.65%. That's how it currently works on campus. So you'll see, so this is an annual, and then the next 2 lines are someone who's on a 9-month appointment. So how do we do that? So for those of you on Zoom, we apologize for this, but we found out just shortly before the presentation, because we have to log on to a system and provide 2-factor authentication, it is not showing up on Zoom. So we're gonna kind of walk you through it. The people here in the room will see it, but we're gonna walk through it and we're gonna let people see. Let me get this, oh, come on. I gotta get this down for a second. Come on. Jump. Find the right place. Okay, whoops, sorry. All right, I'm gonna just keep going like I do in my office at work. My apologies. Portal, there's the portal. So this is where you're gonna get to the budget builder. It does require 2-factor authentication. You should all be familiar with that. You can come out here and I think there are links on the side under frequently used tools that bring you to the portal, but this is the main portal. We are going to use the salary budget builder. So we're gonna come down here to the salary budget builder. And let's say that I want this project to start. And this one actually says January 2016, but I'm gonna actually choose, at this point, we'd be looking at January 2017 at this point as a start date, because January 2016 is past. So I'm gonna look up a person and I have permission to look this person up. So I'm gonna put in his last name. A screen pops up for those who can't see that asks me to put in the name, and I do, and I tell it to run the query. And there's a lot of different things that show up. So I know that he's an associate professor in micro, so I'm gonna pull both his academic year and his summer salary. And then I'm going to close because there's no one else that I really need to look up at this point. So basically we're looking at what we see here, but we're looking at it on the screen here. So this is what we would do. So if I said no, so I'm looking at maybe funding, if it was an NIH grant, I might be looking at maybe having 2 months of his academic year salary. So I'm gonna put 2.0 in there. And maybe in summer, I want 1 month of his salary. So then I can recalculate and the numbers come up where now it's telling me what his, in this spot right here, it shows me the 108,110 would be his academic year salary, and then the 24,022 would be the amount that I'd be using for the grant. His fringe rate for academic year would be 31.63% for the first year. And then it would change each year. Be aware that at MSU, we do not use banded fringe rates at this time. So a lot of universities say fringe rate is 35% across the board. That's not how we work at MSU at this point. Stay tuned. That will probably change. But right now we are budgeting what we would think the actual fringes would be. So the fringe rate will change, and this will give you those fringe rates across all the years of a grant. So up to 6 years out, it will give you what the salary would be, including that 3% increase. And it will also do the same for the summer. And you'll see that, as I said, the summer fringe is at 7.65%. So this is Budget Builder. If you have someone who doesn't appear in Budget Builder or someone you want to hire, for example, if I said I want a postdoc and we don't know who it's going to be yet, but we know that because of the new FLSA policy, that person needs to be making at least $47,476 so that we don't have to pay them overtime. My office automatically will give them $47,000. So what I would do, and I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, I would start just typing numbers in here, like 46.5, for example, which is 1,000 less. I would mark it as yes, it's going to be a postdoc. I would maybe do the, well, I'll keep the fringe at 2%, or the, the salary increase at 2%. And what I would do is I would keep changing that current salary number until that requested salary in year 1 hit the mark I was looking for. Cheating way, kind of a nice little slick way of getting to the salary that you want without really knowing who you're going to hire. So that's just something so you know how to do that. And you'll use it all the time. So, okay. Any questions about Budget Builder?
Can I say something?
Yes.
Judy may have mentioned it or not because I had to step out because my mic did not have a battery. It was dead. One of the biggest errors that our office run into with the Budget Builder is with the starting salaries for the year.
Yeah.
So you really want to make sure when you're calculating your salaries that you make sure the starting calendar year of 2017 or 16 reflects the correct year, and the starting month is correct, okay? Because it will start your whole budget off wrong, okay? Because that's the first thing that we will look at. And so if the first year is wrong, subsequent years are a little off, okay? So I want you, when you're doing that, if you don't have a pre-award office to assist you, make sure that you start off with the correct year and the correct month. Okay. It's right in your handout on link, but this is it right here. Nope. If you go to the next one, it has here Budget Builder. If you go to the next one, it will have Budget Builder link there.
We're also trying right now to get things set up for people in Zoom to be able to see some of this stuff that you in the room can see. So that's what we're doing right now.
Any other questions? Do they have any?
Did we run out?
There are no handouts.
I think we
email all of it out afterwards, so we post it on our site. So
it'll all be there. Of course, I still have to send out a handout for a presentation I did a month and a half ago, and I unfortunately forgot to send it to my new faculty. So if you're new faculty in CNS, it is coming. Okay, it's still not working. Okay. We don't think that what we just tried worked for those in Zoom, so just so you're aware. Okay, so that's kind of a basic, quick idea of how Budget Builder works. There will be a new tool with the Research Administration Project, which will be built right into it, which will make things a lot easier. But for right now, this is what OSP is going to look at. This is what everybody else is going to be looking at. So your best bet is to use this. Okay. I'm trying to go back. Okay. We talked about all this. I didn't know we had all these little things. Isn't that lovely? We talked about all that. Okay, so budget development tools, talking about personnel. So you think you want to hire someone, but you don't really know who you need to hire. And you're not sure, what they would even be. I know I need help on this grant. I know I'm going to have some kind of help in my lab, but I have no idea who that should be or what they do or anything else. So we have some tools for you. So the first thing is the job classification search, which is available here at MSU. And I'm going to take you out there in just a moment. And then once you kind of figure out what job classification you're looking at, then you can usually come up with some salary ranges by going to the second link on this page, which will take you out to the salary ranges that are here on campus. So the first thing we're going to go out to, and I'm going to cheat again and go out my easy way. Whoops, that's the pay ranges. My apologies. Oh, it is. Good. Okay, so this is a job classification search. So I don't know if there are research technicians, there are lab technicians, there are research assistants, we have so many job classifications on this campus. There's a lot. And so you want to make sure, so you're trying to get an idea just for budgeting right now of what you want to include, and you have no idea. So this is what my staff does. So maybe I want to hire some kind of research assistant, not a research associate, not a postdoc, but some kind of assistant to work in my lab. So sorry about that. I have bad allergies and they are kicking into high gear. So my apologies. I'm trying to keep it at bay so that my voice does not die. So we're going into, classification search. So I don't know what I want to hire. So maybe I want to hire some kind of technician. So I'm going to say, let's put in technician and search for titles. Okay, so What happened? Nothing. Nothing. Okay, I think because I didn't give it more information. So I want a technician. And if you're not sure, I might have spelled it wrong too. If I know the sub area, if I know I want to hire a clerical technical person or administrative professional or whatever, I could add that in. But if I'm really not sure, I believe I can just say search for titles, or I could put maybe, let's add that one, and let's add maybe administrative professional. I don't know whether that would be appropriate. I don't think anything else really fits. I don't want them to be a supervisor, and they really don't fit any other categories. So let's try just searching for titles. Okay, so we get all kinds of things. We get audio visual and dairy people and digital services and everything under the sun. But what we're interested in is research. So I'm going to go out, I'm going to look at the next page, and I don't see anything that came up here. Any kind of research technician. So that's going to be problematic. So that didn't work. So I'm going to go back out. I'm going to go back here, and let's just put in research and see what comes up. Now, I will say I didn't try this year. Last year when I did this presentation, I put in technician and I got research technician. So they change it on you. So here's some. So there's research administrators, which are people who do basically the job I do. Here's some research assistants and some research technologists. So that was the problem. I said research technician, and they refer to them as research technologists or maybe a research assistant. So what I might do, I might need to, if I'm not sure which person I want, I might take that job classification, go out and research what their roles are, what their responsibilities would be to find the right person. In this case, I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't want an entry person, and I'm just going to say a research technologist at this point. I don't want an entry person. I want someone who's maybe a little bit more experienced. So research technologist too, that sounds good. So I'm going to pull them up. And here it's going to give me the classification. It's going to tell me the characteristics of their duties and all of these things. They're very general, but it will give you an idea whether this is the person you're really thinking about hiring. Once I know that, yes, this is the person I want to hire, I know that I'm looking at a level 10, and the personnel sub area is CT, which is clerical technical. With that information, I can come up with a salary by going out to MSU's pay ranges, which was the second link on that page. And these are the pay ranges for all of our different staff positions. This is not faculty at all, but for staff positions. So this person was a CT, clerical technical, so I'm going to click there. And they were a level 10 position. I remember that. So I'm going to need to pay them anywhere between $18.83 and $23.52 an hour. So I'm going to take that and put that into like an annual appointment. And basically for an annual person, what is it, 20, I can't even remember the number. I can't believe it. I just drew a blank. There's a certain number that means 40 hours a week times 52 weeks, however, whatever that calculation is. It just left my brain. And I would multiply that by what I'm going to pay them per hour, and that's going to be their annual rate. And that's the number that I'm then going to want to take to Budget Builder and plug in and come up with both their salary and their fringe rates. So that's how I would determine who it is or what kind of position I want. Does that make sense? So a lot of you, especially if you're out there budgeting on your own, you're going to need to know how to get at this information and find this information, because you really are trying to figure out what you're going to need, who you're going to need in your project. So it'll get you through there. All right. Are you here now? Try to make sure we don't step on each other's toes. Okay, so postdocs are kind of a special category at MSU for a couple of reasons. Number one, they have reduced fringe rates for the first 5 years that they're on campus. They have really reduced fringe rates for the first 3 years. And once they're on campus 3 years, you add basically 10% to their lower rate because they're eligible for retirement. But the nice thing about postdocs is usually they're very cost effective in a budget when you're doing research. They can be very cost effective. Suggested stipend levels, You want, you can go out to grants.gov, and there are the NERSA, the stipend levels that NIH has deemed are appropriate for various years of experience. The one thing to be aware of is that NERSA has not updated their numbers yet based on the Fair Labor Standards Act that just, the new ruling there. So that says that effective December 1, 2016, 476 is the minimum level for staff to be exempt from tracking their time or receiving overtime for over 40 hours. And postdocs, there are a couple other caveats, because some of my staff in my office who make over 48.4 are still going to have to track time because of the nature of their job. But for postdocs, that 48.476 is the magic number. If you fall below that, you're only going to be able to work 40 hours a week, or you have the right to request overtime for anything over 40 hours a week, and you're going to have to track your time. If you make under that, if you make over that, then you will be, then you'll still be exempt. So in my office, I'm not budgeting a postdoc for less than 48.5, just to make sure there's enough money there. And that is going to increase at a percentage each year. So we're doing 3% increases each year just to try to make sure that we won't have a problem. So be aware of that, because that is a change that just happened recently and will impact. So if you go 48.5 for a postdoc, you should be pretty good. And those of you who might be postdocs and not making that yet, I'm sure your departments are trying to work that out, but it's not fun. Trying to find the money to bring everyone to that level is not possible, and so every unit is working it out in their own way. Okay, we talked about Salary Budget Builder, and this is the link to it so that you have it, and this is where you come up with those, to look up MSU employees and their fringe benefits, and you've already seen that. Okay, so then we have grad students. So there's a website that you can go out to that will give you the grad student stipend ranges. Those are very helpful. We tend to budget middle of the range for a level 2 graduate student, and we usually are budgeting, in our college, we typically are budgeting for a half-time graduate student, graduate assistant. There's a quarter time, a half time, and a 3/4 time. We've never budgeted a 3/4 time. But half time works 20 hours a week, quarter time works 10 hours a week, and 3/4 time 30 hours a week, but I'm not sure how they do their coursework. So will pretty much, most of the time we use half time, but quarter times are very popular as well. There are graduate assistant tuition costs and health costs that are affiliated with that you need to know of. And there's a nice little link that we have provided that will take you out to those amounts and tell you what you budget. When you budget a grad student, even though they get paid on a biweekly basis, you basically want to budget them by a semester. So I want a grad student for fall and spring, but not in the summer. Or I want a grad student for the whole year. But you're going to pretty much do them by semester, and you're going to find that their tuition and their health costs are by semester. So you want to make sure you budget those. Any questions about personnel? I know we flew through it. Summer. So in the summer, graduate students, you have a couple options. So one option is there's actually there's multiple options. One option is that you're just going to pay them as a grad student, and the grad students, the way their health benefits work, all their health is paid during the fall semester and the spring semester. So there's no health insurance in the summer. That's how they've got them set up. So then you can do it that way, and then you would just have a fringe rate for summer if you paid them as a grad student. Now, if that grad student has passed all of their comprehensive exams, all of them, then you would not have to put in summer tuition and fees for them. But I will say that you need to know for a fact that's the case. And if you're planning a budget now, and that maybe that grad student isn't available to you when you're 2 years down the road when you're actually going to be doing the project, or a year and a half. So we strongly recommend that you budget it in, and then if you don't need it, you use it someplace else. Your other option is to pay them hourly in the summer. And there are a lot of departments that switch their grad students over to hourly pay in the summertime. And they pay them an hourly rate. They can work, you know, just like any hourly student in the summer, they can work up to 40 hours a week. And we'll talk about that in a second, but they can work up to 40 hours a week, and you have to include FICA. Use 7.65% fringe, the same you'd use for summer faculty. Make sure you're budgeting that, because you will get charged it. Now, the one thing I will say is be aware of the Health Care Act. So HR has a lovely website that talks about that. But if your students are working full-time in the summer and they're working over a certain number, there's a certain number of hours, and they hit that point, and then you have to pay health insurance for them, whether they need it or take it or not. And so you could get hit with an extra $5,000 basically a year in healthcare costs on students if you're budgeting them for a large amount in the summer. OSP is going to be checking for that. It's on their radar screen. My office is going to be checking for that. If you tell me a student's working more than about 12 weeks at 40 hours, I'm going to come back and say, not a good idea. Don't test it. You don't want to take that chance. Or if you know you need to, just make sure you budget for it. Yes. So it's, yeah, it's supposed to. I mean, I believe it's a very gray, so this is a very gray area. And that one time they told us that no, it wasn't going to exclude them, but it should exclude them because they've already paid their healthcare costs for the year. So I believe now the university does go ahead and consider them excluded. But what I will say about the healthcare law is it's ever changing, it's ever evolving. And what I would recommend, and what we recommend to our faculty, is don't get caught short, because nothing would be worse than you planning a grant to the penny, you know, really nickel and diming your grant to get it as low as possible, and then something happens like $5,000 in healthcare you didn't expect because there might be a change in the law. Just if you need it, budget it. And if you can justify it and justify that you need that person for those amount of hours, you know, the federal government should be willing to pay for it. So it's just, I've seen it go both ways, and I would hate to have anyone get caught short. That would be my best. I mean, we would recommend everyone not sell themselves short.
I just want to recommend something from our office. We deal with this day by day. We take it case by case. I recommend if you're running into a situation and you want to hire a graduate student in the summer, call our office. Because there's going to be a series of questions that we're going to want to ask you. Because we do not want to go ahead and approve your budget, do your proposal, and it's not in compliance, okay? Right. Because the funding agency where you're applying to may have some questions for that and have you justify it. And we're going to ask you to justify, why do you need a grad student to work 40 hours a week in the summer?
And they're also going to come back and say, you know, they're going to also say, are you sure that this meets university guidelines too, to make sure that we're not violating anything there.
Right. And so many times when we're working with departments, we'll try to see if maybe an undergrad student can do those type of duties. And then you're not really dealing with a lot there. And when you're talking about a grad student and you have employed them and given them fringe benefits throughout the year, you don't know where they are. It could be their third year and you run into some problems. And you did not factor in a possibility of having to pay health care at $5,000. So that's why what you want to do is, if you do not have a departmental administrator who you can go to, who can research and communicate with our office, we would recommend that you call our office directly and we dialogue. And we'll ask you the different series of questions. And no, each case is different. You guys know, because you're the one working on the project. You know what type of assistance you need to make that project successful. We don't. We are here to recommend for you, because there's some times that we do recommend, but faculty may say, put it forward anyway. We know that. And we deal with this all the time, and chances are it's kicked back. But it's coming from the funding agency. It's not coming from us. So then you guys will realize that maybe I should have listened.
We don't try and tell you things arbitrarily. And I have this discussion with my faculty in CNS all the time. We're not trying to make your lives miserable. We really are not. We're trying to help you. We're trying to help you because we've seen things come back. And we've been trying, working with faculty to try and correct problems when they let you correct them. Thank God for some of the funding agencies who say, hey, you're not in compliance. You've got until noon tomorrow to get in compliance. That doesn't happen all that often, but when it does, it's helpful. And then we find out these things that are messed up or the things that we're potentially doing wrong, and we're trying to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future. So that hopefully we all down the trail will learn from that experience, and we won't do that anymore, so that hopefully we never have it happen again. So in OSP, and when I have a question, I'm in her office because Pat works is with the group that my office works with, and Pat and her teammates over there, they're the ones I go to. If I don't know the answer, they're the ones, or if I'm not sure and I want a really high level response, they're the ones I'm going to say, hey, can we do this? And run it past them. Because we'd rather tell you right off the bat that it may not work this way, let's see if we can do it another way, than have you have a problem once it's submitted. Nothing's worse than being returned without review.
And things that we have to look out for is not just the agency's rules and regulations, it's Michigan State's rules and regulations, because we're audited.
And union rules and regulations at Michigan State, because we got to make sure we're not violating all the rules with all the unions. It's loads of fun, but it's our job and we love it. You had a question, I think. It's a good question. So sometimes we'll have an adjunct faculty that they'll want to put on a grant within our college. We don't have a lot in my college, I will say. But we will usually try and come up with what would be an appropriate salary for them, for their level of experience, and would probably work with the budgeting office to see that. And then if we needed to fund them and give them some money for what they're doing, we might then, and we would run this through OSP and make sure there's not a problem. But we would probably try and budget some of their time, or perhaps work out some kind of an arrangement, like if it's a physician who's being paid full-time at a hospital, we might be trying to work out some kind of agreement with them where maybe they end up being a subaward on the grant, and then we're paying for part of their time.
Or even a consultant.
Or even a consultant. So it might be, it ends up being on an individual basis as far as what the person does outside of MSU, and how best, whether they need money or maybe they just need some supplies or some other things, maybe some travel funds related to the grant. That's not as hard to deal with and might be able to be just inserted in your grant, and then you pay for their travel for the grant. There are ways to deal with it, but it almost has to be on an individual basis, because it depends on where that person's coming from and what their other job is. Yes, Shoba.
Pay for a consultant, what is the maximum salary, rate you can pay for a consultant?
It varies.
I ran into a couple of things where the rate was quite a bit, and OSP told us we had to scale it back.
And all of a sudden it dawned on me that for those in Zoom, you don't know what the questions are because you don't hear them. So the question is, how do you know what to pay a consultant?
It varies because each agency has their own maximum. So depending on the agency, USDA has, what is it, $600, $598?
Yeah.
It varies. NIH really doesn't have one. You have to justify it. But our office will ask you to provide documentation as far as their hourly rate, their hours, and how you arrived at that information, and whether or not this person has a specialized service or not. So it will vary.
The 600 is per hour, or is it
daily maximum rate? Daily maximum.
Right. 600 would be a daily maximum rate.
A lot of times you'll find with the different agencies, they don't have an hourly rate. They have a daily maximum rate.
Yes.
Along similar lines already asked, a research professor.
So research professors are considered to be faculty. They're fixed term faculty here at MSU. So they would be, you would be able to, they do have permission to submit grants if they're an assistant professor above. budgeting for them, you can budget for them, and they should be in Budget Builder the same as any other type of faculty. They're considered a fixed term position, but they should all be showing up in Budget Builder as well.
They're hired. Could be AY, could be
Right.
AN, depending.
I typically see research professors in my college, in CNS, I typically see them as annual. So then I might be putting in, a month, and then it's not the reduced fringe rate for summer. It's the annual fringe amount.
And let me just add to what you asked. What our office looks for, a lot of times when you having faculty as PIs or co-Is or key investigators, some things that run across us will be you're adding more money to your current salary that's on Budget Builder. Because if you get funded, you're going to give yourself a raise. That's not allowable.
Or do that for any of your staff, other than bringing them up to the FLSA,
Right.
That new minimum level. It's not going to fly. You can't just give them a raise because you're getting funded. It has to be fair and equitable across the university.
Yep.
Yes. You can put retired faculty on. Yep. We tend to take maybe their most recent salary that we can locate, and retired faculty would just get 7.65% FICA as their fringe rate. So you can use retired faculty on grants. Some funding agencies, just so you're aware, do have limits on how much effort you can put on a grant. Right. So NSF is world famous for this one, where they're going to say 2 months of summer salary. They don't even want to really see academic year salary on grants. And you have to really justify why if you need to. Education is one where that comes up a lot, but they're very successful in getting AY effort. But 2 months of summer salary, and that's it across all your funded projects for NSF. So they've kind of set that general rule. And so you have to really justify why you should ask for more than 2 months. And it might be that you're paid 100% from research funds, and that's your only funding. But they don't want to supplement your university salary, as I've heard one program officer say to me. He didn't feel he needed to, supplement the university's income. So there are some agencies that do have those kind of rules, and some of them are written and some of them are unwritten.
Right. Just for example, you have NIH. NIH has a salary cap, whether you're AY or AN. They don't restrict your months that you can work, but they restrict your salary.
Right.
Annualizing salary, like if someone is moving to a role where they're going to be, they're in an academic year and they're going to be with the grant moving to annual, how does that work?
And if it's not reflected on the Budget Builder, we would ask for an email or a letter from your department chair or your physical officer who has authorization for signature for your budgets. Because you guys know what the future salaries are going to be. We don't know. But it's so many times, unfortunately, we cannot take the word of an individual because we've been burnt before.
And this is going to be for an external private donor, not for one of the major.
Right.
So I'm building a budget for private donor, not to one of these.
So you're going to be a subcontractor to that?
I'm actually going to be the director of the whole thing. So it will actually
Like a private foundation kind of.
It'll be like a research center here at the university.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Privately, not public.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Answer the question I would have. All these rules hold up for applications to foundations, or is that a whole separate ball?
It's a whole separate ball game. Because
in many ways, there are many rules that will still apply because they're rules that we use here at the university to keep everything kind of normalized and straight across all. We don't want to have, if you get a foundation funding, you're not going to go, woohoo, I can give myself a 10% raise. The university is not going to allow that. Right. But there are a lot of different rules, and I'll let Pat finish from there.
That's why I'm here, because I'm budgeting for that purpose. These rules apply, I still have to meet the university's rules. So.
Right.
But you also have to meet the foundation rules. Oh, yeah. And sometimes they can be really wacky. I'm working with one right now that's just incredibly wacky, and it's got me going a million ways.
I'm interested in making sure I'm living.
Right.
Yeah. Are you working with a departmental person to assist you with that budget?
I'm pretty far along. People are pretty happy with my budget.
Okay.
I just wanted to learn see if I had missed any key ingredients.
Okay.
And you've been in contact with OSP?
Well, see,
So that'd be a good thing. That'd be your next step. What I would recommend
we
is
need to
tomorrow
talk.
is tomorrow you make it, tomorrow you send an email. Depending on your, we can talk after.
Oh, development officer?
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So you do have people who are involved. So good. Okay. If we're, any more questions for personnel? Yes.
So you just mentioned NSF has regulation on annual appointment salaries because they don't support annual appointment.
Well, so NSF, if you're a PI or a co-PI on a grant, they're going to pretty much kind of give you that 2-month salary limit. If you are a postdoc on a grant, is that your role where you would be a postdoc on a grant? They will allow, I mean, we put 12 months on for postdocs all the time because they're going to be working 100% on this project. If you're a postdoc who's gotten permission to be a PI or co-PI on a grant, you're going to probably need to make sure that you're working with an office to make sure you're justifying the heck out of why you need more than 2 months of effort on the grant, which is, and what's allowable is I'm paid 100% off of research dollars, and that's a good excuse for NSF. But if you're taking the role as a postdoc of a PI or co-PI with permission from the university, because if you're a postdoc, you do not have permission from the university to submit a grant. You have to get special permission. Just know that right now. It's a fairly easy process, but you need to do it. So if you have that, if you are in that situation, you can have more than you kind of have to work it out on an individual basis in some ways, but you can ask for more, but you have to justify it very well.
So what is the factor of annual appointment for somebody in NSF?
So yes, if you're an NSF, if you're on an annual appointment, 12-month appointment, you want to do an NSF grant, yes, you can do an NSF grant. And you can put in up to 2 months of salary on an NSF grant. They will allow that. They may cut it back when they fund it, but they will allow you to do that, but up to 2 months. And so they will allow that. They're not, I think they'd rather see summer salary, but if you're not on a summer appointment, they're not gonna discriminate against you. Hopefully. I don't think they will. Yes.
Is this the section where we talk about consultants? Or is that...
It's later. We're getting there. Okay. That's an other cost, and that's a little further down. So I'm gonna hand it over to Pat now.
Okay. Do you guys need a break or can we keep going? Okay. Equipment. So many times in our office, we get a budget that has equipment. Now, I'm going to discuss a little later indirect costs and how that applies, okay? But for these purposes, we're talking about equipment. And this is for the federal side, okay? Equipment is one single item with a useful life of 1 year or more, $5,000, period, which is excluded from indirect costs. We can't charge indirect cost on that. For example, a lot of times we get a budget and it has a refrigerator for maybe $2,400, a cooler because they're doing something that may be $1,500. And then the budget, they have charged IDC on that. Okay? Excuse me, they have not charged IDC on that. It's incorrect. Since it's less than $5,000, it's not considered equipment. We may think in our mind it's equipment, but it's not equipment. So many times we have to send that budget back and ask them to correct it. So what you want to keep in mind is, I'm going to use a computer. You're buying 5 computers. Each one of those are $1,000. Do you think IDC should be charged for that purchase? It's a quiz. What do you think? Good. You said no? Any other ones?
Each individual one.
Each individual one.
$5,000 or more.
Exactly. See, that's the most common mistake is made on budgets. Because when you're talking about 5 pieces of a laptop or a computer, each costing $1,000, you're thinking in your mind, that adds up to $5,000. So I should not have to charge IDC on that. IDC should be charged on it. Why? Because individually, if it stands alone, it costs how much? $1,000. So it's not equipment. So we can charge IDC on that. But if you're buying a new, what's one of the equipment that your faculty person had was real, it was a big one.
Some kind of microscope,
Yeah.
Specialized microscope or something, or one of those really expensive freezers that cost like $8,000 because it has to keep everything at such a low temperature all the time.
That lasts more than 1 year, doesn't it? And it's $8,000. So we have to exclude IDC from that, okay? And sometimes a lot of departments, a lot of faculty, that's a tweener. It gets kind of confused on that. That's why our office is a second set of eyes for you. Because what happens is if we don't catch that mistake and we send it to the funding agency, you're thinking you're going to get a $50,000 budget. It's been adjusted. And they're going to tell you why, because of an error. And they're going to ask us for a revised budget. And then our office is going to say, shoot, we missed it. Okay, so you really want to be careful with that. And so as I'm going through this, it's very important that you understand it because we see it all the time. So is that explanation clear enough for you guys, or do I need to give you some more? Okay. Travel. I'm going to do a demo for travel because when we get travel and we read the justification, sometimes it doesn't match. The calculations are not right, okay? So I want to make sure that you understand how to do that. So the people that are on Zoom, if you want to go to that website, I will be able to do that for you. Whoops. Where is that at?
Are you trying to get?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at that.
Sorry. I'll help. Here, I'm going to move down here. We're going to just tab to it because.
Oh, that's what you did? Oh, okay.
I think it's.
Okay. It's recently been redesigned, so bear with me, okay? So when you go to travel websites through our controller's office, you want to find out under expenses and reimbursement. You already know where you're going. So for the sake of demonstration today, I'm going to go to continental US. And I'm going to say where we're going to go. We're going to go to, let's do Chicago, Illinois. It's going to find the rates for me. You notice where it says Chicago, meals and incidentals. You're allowed, if you're in travel status. Travel status is overnight status, not you're just going to Grand Rapids or Detroit for a meeting and you're coming back. You have to sleep in order to be able to budget this, okay? A lot of times in solicitations, you're required to go somewhere for a conference or an annual meeting. These are you want to find out where the meeting is, okay? And then
when it is.
I'm sorry?
And when it is.
And when.
It makes the difference.
It's a difference.
It's charged.
Yes. So for these purposes, you'll see 74. 74 is your meal allowance, okay? Whoops. You changed something on me, Judy.
What happened? I'm trying to get back to the other side. Hang on.
Say we're at the bottom.
I think.
What are you hitting?
I can't even. Oh, sorry. I'm doing it the wrong way.
Where is it? Right here.
Oh, she found it.
Whoops.
Nope, I did it wrong. There it is.
No.
Keep going back and forth.
Wow. That's changed. Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry about that, guys. So once you find out where you are, that's $74. And then you look here, like for example, if you're doing like ground transportation, taxi, limo, you'll see the reimbursement charge for that, okay? Currently right now, per mileage is 54 cents. We don't make up the rules, the controller's office does. So I'm not gonna go through each one because you can go through that for the.
When you're planning your trips, make sure you're thinking about the fact that you have to get from the airport to the hotel where you're staying, and you may have to take taxi, and that you're going to be, and also keep in mind those meetings. Sometimes you go to meetings, conferences, and the meals are included, And MSU can see that when you go to reimburse, they're going to see that stuff's included. So you got to take that out of the calculation of your daily rates.
So for the illustration, we had an example of Chicago, Illinois. So we seen that it was $74 for your meals. You see here how your breakfast is broken out: breakfast, lunch, dinner, incidentals. MSU does not require a receipt, okay? You just cannot go over that amount, however you slice it, even if you don't eat breakfast, you know? So conference may have provided the breakfast. So what they're gonna ask you for with your reimbursement, they're gonna ask you for a copy of that agenda. And that agenda is gonna indicate to them what meals were allowed and paid for by the conference. So it's not like you can eat at the conference and go to dinner also. They catch you. So is that something that you're not gonna wanna do? And that is not through the pre-award side, that's the post-award side that will catch that. But as you're building your budget, you're gonna wanna know, because in the solicitation, they'll tell you a lot of times what's covered. So when you're building your budget, that's how you'll wanna do that. Any questions? Okay. Now on the illustration, it also talks about foreign. That's a whole new baby by itself, okay? And that's gonna take another 2 hours. So I'm not even gonna do that for today. And that takes you to this site for US Department of State. And that's a whole another bag of worms that we're not even gonna discuss today. But I wanna tell you that the same website where I went to will also give you information on the foreign information too.
They give you room rates and they give you your per diem per day, you know, your amount per day. So sometimes they'll just give you one lump sum that'll include hotel and all of your hotel, your meals, and your incidentals. And if you're budgeting, use that because you can prove where you came up with those numbers.
Those are easy, but what about, you know, when you're doing a budget, it's a foreign budget you've got to do, and especially if it is an international collaboration you have. What about airfare rates? They keep changing so much.
So the question is on
It
foreign
also
air.
depends on when you travel to a country, because there's a peak time travel and there is a
Right.
Correct.
And that's true. And that is very true. So the question has to do with air travel, especially foreign air travel, and how it changes all the time, and that there's peak times and not peak times. So I'll tell you what I do, and that's I'm out at Expedia or some other website, and I am trying to pick like the current year's version of, if I know they're going to be traveling in October of 2017, I'm out trying to get maybe flights and a whole range of flights from Lansing to Chicago, in this case, if we were flying, a whole range of flights for this same time period, even though I know it's going to occur a year later. And then I will probably pick like a mid-range flight, not the cheapest flight, not the most expensive flight. I'll try and pick more in the mid-range, and I might add 3% to that, assuming that the flight cost is going to go up by an inflation factor of 3% next year. And I will document how I came up with that number so that I know in the future what I did and why, and I can justify it. But you're right. So if you just go out to a website to get travel and you don't put in specific dates or specific times of the year, you could sell yourself short, especially if you're flying like to, I don't know, Florida, you know, Orlando in June when, you know, everybody's going to Disney World. So you want to, and instead of going in February or March or January or February, when your rates are going to be a lot lower, make sure you're trying to, when you're looking at travel places to help you come up with flight amounts, make sure you're taking those time periods and to try to look in that same time period. Does that help?
In addition to that, I would recommend that you, like Judy said, work with our MSU travel people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have Concur, you know, so they are there and you can tell them what you want to do, that you want to fly out here. They deal with that all the time because you got to remember, when you're preparing a budget, it's estimate. It's the best of your ability to do an estimate. And you want to make sure that your estimate is as best as you can be, because if you're short, your department's going to have to pick up the cost. So you want to make sure going into it that you utilize all the resource possible. And that resource is the travel office, our Concur, and OSP. And so many times with foreign travel, there's so many different carriers, and we just make sure that it's a U.S. air carrier. And like Judy said, you don't want to take the most expensive, but I see budgets and I go in there and look, they took the most expensive. I'm not going to change that. I'm not going to take that out because they travel there. They know around that time how much that is. I haven't traveled. So who am I to say it's too much? I'm going to leave that to the funding agency to question it. Because foreign travel, I just don't know because it fluctuates. And so you want to make sure what's the worst? It's a higher end. A lot of times when you're going foreign, you're usually dealing with a USAID as a funding agency. And sometimes you just go in there for a meeting because you may have a subcontract somewhere. So it could vary. So I would just recommend that you utilize the resources that we have on campus to try to make your budget as accurate as you can. Any more questions on the travel piece? Okay. We're going to skip the international sponsors because that's a whole nother thing
That's
by
2
itself.
or 3 more
Hours.
brown bags.
Yeah.
At least.
Other things that you can budget, materials and supplies, printed supplies. This is just an example. You guys know when you're building your budget, what type of supplies you need to make your project run successfully. Okay. What is illustrated here is just common things that we see. Okay. It goes with the computers, toner, pencils, paper. It all goes back to the RFP. Although it's here, you got to read your solicitation because a lot of these may not be allowable.
Oftentimes those aren't actually allowable. Those ones that are at the bottom, the computers, the toner paper, and things like that. Computers you just have to justify why it's needed for the project. And trust me, I've had this in a budget justification. I want to have a computer for home so that I can do some work from work, but then I want my kids to be able to do their homework. That is not an excuse. That's not a justification that NSF will accept. So you have to just justify it well of why it's needed for your project.
And we see a lot of things like that though, too.
And it sounds funny, but I at least once a month we're correcting that kind of language in a budget justification.
And another biggest mistake is food and meals. We're going to have a meeting. So I'm going to order out food. When you get to the post-award side, that's not going to be paid for. Your out-of-town guests will be covered, but your meal will not. So you got to keep that in mind. Why? Because you're not in travel status. Okay, but you are having a meeting to discuss your project. Sorry.
Comment on that. Some of the NSF conferences I've attended to, and the Inspector General of NSF, the representatives, when they talk about the budget, the 2 things they do talk about is the computers, which they keep saying is that if the computer is only going to be used for the project and nothing else,
right,
then you can justify a computer. But what their tone is saying is don't ask for a computer, actually. They sort of discourage you from putting that into your budget. And the second thing they make a big issue is about the food.
Right.
Food, they say, I don't know, it all sort of brings up red flags.
Right.
And they sort of discourage you from providing foods. But, the whole thing is that if you are having workshops in your budget for, let's say, we had some NSF AGAP programs and we did provide food for students and stuff.
That's okay.
That was okay.
That's okay.
But food for other things was absolutely
Right.
not allowed.
So just to recap for those who can't hear. So we were talking about NSF in particular. Shobo brought up, she's been to some conferences, and NSF in particular, basically their program officers are saying, unless your computer is being pretty much used 100% for the project, you shouldn't even put it in the budget. So you can put it in for, maybe you're hiring a postdoc for your project. Put a computer in for them. They're going to need something to work on. You can do that. You can justify it. But it gets a little trickier if you're putting a computer in. NSF is not going to pay for your desktop that you want to replace because it's old and your department hasn't bought you one yet. So just don't ask for that. Just don't even go down that route. But there are times when it's appropriate. The other thing she brought up was the issue about food, and that if you're planning maybe conferences or you're planning meetings that you're going to have students come to and you're going to feed them at the conference, or at that meeting, NSF will pay for those kinds of things. But if you're planning an event or you're planning to have another one that we get, you can't, if you're having working meetings in your lab over the lunch hour, NSF is not going to fund your lunch. They're just not. So you just have to make sure that you're, and part of our job, both Pat's and mine, Pat more than me because she sees it much more, but is to make sure that that's being broken out and that we're not asking for those things that we know are going to, that really are not appropriate for them to pay. So we try to keep the stuff in that we know NSF is good with and that they're fine with, and NIH and DOE and every other sponsor we work with. But take those things out that we know are going to be problematic. You don't want to tick off your review panel.
That's why, again, our office is a second set of eyes for you, okay? Things that you don't catch, we're going to catch. And we're going to make sure that we do the best of our ability to make sure that we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, okay? And like Judy mentioned earlier, we're not trying to be unreasonable for you guys, but we see so much that we feel that we have that expertise to be able to advise you on the correct things to get your project reviewed and funded.
We want to get you funded too. It's in our best interest and in yours as well.
Any questions on this piece? Okay. Other direct costs. Someone mentioned consultant services. If included in the budget, consultants may not be an MSU employee. A lot of times we get that. You cannot consult while you're working from MSU because you're working. You can consult, but you won't be paid. So what we'll do is when you have a consultant, another person's name listed there and with no justification, because sometimes our office gets a budget but no justification with it. And so we'll look at the individual items very closely. And when we're going through, especially your other direct costs, the entire budget, we're trying to figure out pretty much what's going on here. And so many times we get consulting services from MSU and we'll look it up because we have this search capability, like you guys, to know who all the employees are on campus. And so I'll look and see who they've named as a consultant. I'm like, that's a professor. And so immediately I'm interacting with you on your budgets to see what was going on. Because you may have a piece that I don't know. That person could be retiring at the end of the year and you have them coming on your project in the summer. That's allowable. They're done with MSU. Okay, so we're not going to automatically say not allowable. We're going to dialogue with you to see what's going on because you have a piece that maybe we don't have yet. And so when both parties talk, then we can come to a consensus and make it work. So I don't want you to think that maybe if an MSU, well, no, if you're paid on the payroll from MSU, you cannot be paid on a grant as a consultant, period. Okay?
Do I take that to mean that one college couldn't purchase or consult with the service for the services of another specialist in another college?
Correct.
So the question is, can you consult or bring in someone from another college onto your budget, bring them in as a consultant or in that kind of a role on your budget? You can. They go under personnel and you have to pay them some kind of effort and you have to pay their fringe benefits as well. Okay, you just can't put them under a consultant line.
Right.
You can use them. You just have to pay their salary. You're buying time from their department in a way. So you're paying some of their salary. You're going to move them over onto your grant for a specified amount of time if you get funded, and you're going to pay part of their salary and a part of their fringes. But you can't pay them consulting fees. So it's instead of going at the bottom of your budget, it's got to go up the top of your budget under personnel.
Right. And what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that does not exceed 100% of time. So we're going to look at your percentages and see, just to make sure. Again, second set of eyes.
And they just corrected that on one I just sent over where we literally had someone way overcommitted, but he was a consultant yet again on another grant and basically has 140% effort listed right now on grants. And it's like, no. So he's an unpaid consultant on this one because we don't have time to but we got to deal with all the other stuff coming up.
And so what we're going to ask, if you have a consultant in your budget, we're going to ask for the hourly rate for the services. It needs to be reasonable, okay?
Or a daily rate. an hourly or a daily rate.
And paid consultants are usually paid individually and not through the institution. So you have a lot of times the budgets that we see in our offices, they're not MSU employees. They have a specialized service somewhere else. Okay, and they're normally paid on the PSC, but that's a postal word issue. So that's not why we're here today. Any questions on this piece?
I just want to say one more thing because we've run into this more and more on that, just quickly, just to say that if you're going to have a consultant and you want to pay someone as a consultant and they maybe work for another university, make sure that that consultant's university is going to be okay with it, because some universities will not allow people to do that. And it has to be more like a subaward. So be aware that there are instances you just may need to be a little bit more of a talk with that person and his or her pre-award office, wherever they're at their university, to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because it's not fun to have to go in and set up a subaward when you didn't expect to have to set up a subaward.
Right. And what you can do is what we're going to ask you a series of questions on whether or not that person should be a consultant or should it be an institutional subaward agreement. Okay. And if you want to go to our website, we have the differences. So you want to read those definitions and the examples that we have there and see if it fits into what you're trying to do.
I think we have a question from outside.
We do. We have a question coming in from Zoom. The question is, I'm in a fee-for-service unit on campus, strictly staff funded, and provide evaluations for grant-funded projects. How can we be added to a budget without being a PI?
They reimburse some of their salary. So salary and fringes and put supplies, whatever that they may need to do their job, that you would build those into your budget. And then on the post-award side, if it was me, I'd probably have like a little sub account set up for them so that their funding is separate and we can keep track of it. But you can definitely put them in, and they don't have to be a PI or a co-PI. They can be a role of a consultant on the grant without a problem.
Thank you.
Any more questions on consultants? Subawards. Subawards. Well, let me see. I don't want to take this.
Well, that's what I want to work with.
Yeah. I
want to work with this individual at University of Michigan because I want them to do this piece of my project. And we want to work together on this. And you've got to be able to get money to them so that they can do their piece. Is that a good way to kind of describe what a subaward could be?
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm the person that U of M wants to work with because I've got all this knowledge in this thing. And they're going to give me a piece of their money if they get funded. That's what a subaward sort of is. Right. In a nutshell.
And then from the subaward, there are different things that we require from a subaward than we would do from a consultant. So if you have a subaward, we're going to expect for them to provide their own individual budget, because when you're working with someone from another institution, MSU is the lead, for example. You're going to tell your colleague at University of Michigan, how much money do you need in order to do the work that I need for you to do? So you guys are going to collaborate. We're out of that. You guys do that yourselves. So once you have determined an amount for that subaward, our office and the pre-award office from your colleges will ask for some things from your subaward. They're going to ask for a budget from the subaward, their statement of work.
What are they going to be doing for the project? What's your role on the project? It's all a statement of work is.
Yeah, yeah. And then we're going to ask for a signed commitment form by an authorized official that they're aware that you're doing this work with another institution, because they're going to bear some responsibility also. So we have a form that we will give to you, and you would forward that on to your contact. So we would not be communicating directly with your subaward. You would be doing that. You would get all the information for the subaward, and you would turn it to us. And if it was a federal award, and if they had indirect cost, we would ask for a copy of their federally negotiated rate that they've done with the U.S. government, okay? So a subaward place who does not have indirect cost policy in place cannot invent one because they're working with us.
And another thing you should know, and I'll say this is like the number one rule for everyone in this room and everyone on this campus. None of us have permission to sign on behalf of Michigan State University, ever, for anything. They're the people.
We're it.
They are, well, there's others as well, but
Yeah.
when it comes to grants,
Yeah.
they are
Grants.
it. They are it. They are the be all end all. You cannot agree to put if you sign anything, you're not committing Michigan State to anything. And you could be in violation of federal law. I mean, seriously, with certain kinds of things, you could even be in jail.
It happens.
And we would hate to have you in jail. So don't sign anything. Talk to OSP. They will get everything signed, and they are the official signers for the university.
And if you want to know who the authorized signatures are on campus, on our website, it has authorized signatories.
None of us here, and I'm not.
Me either.
I don't want to be. I never
Higher
want to be. I'm not.
That's
So
right.
I'm glad it's their office.
Any questions regarding your subawards? No. The question was, should you budget indirect cost on top of subawards? Well, yes and no. The subaward have their own indirect cost rate. We can charge the first $25,000 on a subaward. That's it, of our indirect cost rate. So the first $25,000 we can charge. So example, so if you have a subaward with someone who is going to be having a budget of $100,000, we only can charge $25,000 of that.
Our F&A rate on the first $25,000.
That's it. That's another most common error, is that there. And so what we do, we run the numbers to make sure that you excluded things that you need to have excluded in order to make sure the budget's right, okay?
It is not a tax. There are lots of things that have to happen when you set up a subaward. There are a lot of people involved behind the scenes. There's a lot of billing that has to happen. There's a lot of checks that have to be cut. And trust me when I tell you that the F&A on that $25,000 doesn't even come close to covering what the true costs are for having a subaward on a grant. So it's a bargain.
Right. So if you
really is.
And on our website, we have everything that you possibly would need. You know, how to develop a budget, how to develop a proposal. It has a list of guidelines through there. So we've streamlined our website to help you be more efficient in the work that you do. So it also has examples of what we just talked about also. But please do not hesitate to contact our office if you're working diligently yourself on a budget and you're frustrated. We are here to help you. I sincerely mean that, because when you're successful, so are we.
And if you're in a unit with pre-award unit, like, you know, the College of Natural Science or Education or Engineering, there are a group of us out there, we're here to help you as well. I mean, there is no stupid question. There is no unnecessary question. We are here to help you be successful.
So I just want to, just last emphasis I want to put on this. So many times when you're dealing with subawards, it could be in Africa somewhere, in Burma, anywhere, and they don't have the same policies as we have. So when you've tried as best as you can to try to recover that required paperwork that we've asked, please know that we will still submit your proposal without that information. But that subaward, if it's awarded, will not be set up until we have that documentation in hand. Okay? Questions? Okay.
Questions?
Direct, we talked about indirect costs. Does everyone know what that is, correct? No? Okay. That is MSU has negotiated with NIH to come up with cost of administrative costs. When we're behind the scenes working, there's a list of goes back out to the university. Some of it goes back to your unit, some of it comes back to central administration. If you want to go to our website, we have our federally negotiated rate there. It's a 4-page document. It tells you how the money is allocated. Okay? And so every, 5 years or so, there's a new rate that is determined by the powers, the higher ups, that determine what that rate's going to be. Currently, right now, our rate is 55%. Okay?
For non-campus an on-campus
On-campus.
research project. There are other types of rates, and if you go to that site, it'll explain what those are. And if you
Right.
have a question about whether you should be using the on-campus or off-campus rate, call your
Our
research office
Yep.
or call OSP, and they will help you walk through the determination of what your rate really should be if you have any question about it.
Now, during the course of the training today, we talked about excluding, you can't charge this to IDC. So what is excluded is you cannot charge equipment, as we discussed earlier. It's participant support cost. We only can charge the first $25,000 on a subaward. So if you look at that letter, it tells you what is excluded. We cannot charge tuition, IDC on tuition. We can't charge ourselves because that's MSU. Can't charge ourselves. So there are a lot of different ins and outs of excluding, but I recommend that although we have a federally negotiated rate, we have to adhere to your solicitation. If your solicitation says that we only can charge 15%, that's all we can charge, regardless of what our rates are, because we have rules and regulations we must follow, and that solicitation supersedes what we do.
And the solicitation can say, we won't pay grad assistant tuition and fees. Even though typically you can put that on a grant, they'll say we won't pay it. So it can change the rules a bit.
So a lot of times when I'm reviewing a solicitation, what I'm looking at is unallowable cost or restricted cost. And I'm noting that so that I can remember that when I'm reviewing that budget, this is not allowed for this funder. Okay, so each solicitation can be different. So you cannot assume that since you've done an NIH last week, that you don't have to read that solicitation again. They're different. Depending on the fund, it could be an RO1, it can be so much. Any questions on that? Direct versus F&A? I just want to reiterate, it's very important to check your solicitation, to check the amounts. Because sometimes they'll have in a solicitation, indirect cost is not allowed. And we can't charge anything. So that means we're not going to get anything back for all the work that we put into it. But we're still going to work hard to get your project funded. So I don't want you to think if we can't have indirect cost on your budget, that we're not going to work hard. We're going to work hard regardless for you.
I spent more time on a $13,000 grant a week ago than I did on my $4 million grant. And that's the truth. That's just how it worked out. I spent more time, and the PI spent more time, and OSP spent more time on that $13,000 grant.
Which I already talked about this, okay? Our federally negotiated indirect cost rate. Again, Judy mentioned earlier that we have an off-campus rate and an on-campus rate, okay? And if you're not sure which rate to charge, again, if you go to our link talking about our federally negotiated rate, it'll tell you. It will tell you. And if you don't want to look at it, call our office. Call our office. If you're trying to work on doing your technical part of your proposal and you don't really know, or send an email. And then we'll respond back to you because we really try to respond back within a day, if not the same day. And this is what it looks like online. That's what our current federally negotiated rate is currently. We have research. And that MTDC is modified total direct cost. That means it's excluding the tuition that we can't charge, the remaining of that subcontract that I gave an example for earlier. We can't charge that remainder of that $75,000. It excludes certain things. Whoops. And so that's just some information there that you can know. And that rate is good until 6/30/19. And sometimes we get a lot of calls for off-campus, trying to figure out if the Kellogg Center is considered off-campus. It is. That's an off-campus rate.
Kellogg Center is considered
off-campus rate.
Kellogg Biological Station, off-campus.
Off-campus. Took me a long time to try to figure this out. So, and I have cheat sheets because things change all the time. Research, as you guys know, you're doing research, things change. So you really can't assume that it's the same all the time. We got to read and we got to find it out. And sometimes you may call our office. We may not be sure about the answer, but we'll go find out and give you the correct answer to the best of our ability.
And if you call me, I'll call her. That's how it works.
give an early deadline to people providing you with documents. As we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, soon as you know, let us know. It's communicate. It's going to make all of our lives better, because depending on what type of proposal you're completing, there's so many documentations and documents that are required, okay? And so different letters of support. So read the RFP. We're going to be reading the RFP to help you to do your work and submit these proposals on time, because you don't want to submit a late proposal because you don't want your work to go in vain because they won't accept it. Again, as I mentioned, for the subcontractor documents, at the proposal stage, if you don't have all of them, we will still submit your proposal, but if it's awarded, we will hold it up until we receive all those required documentations.
And that's wonderful when you're working, especially with foreign collaborators, with foreign subcontracts, because sometimes trying to get all the documents from them, especially with the time differences and the fact that a lot of, especially third world countries where you're just not working with the kind of technology we have, that can really bind you up badly if you don't have that.
Different bio sketches for key personnel. Different funding agencies require certain formats. So we're here again to help you with that. How much you?
Okay, so the budget justification, I'm just gonna flip through this quickly. It's an important document, it really is, because it could describe why you need everything you need. Don't talk about anything in that budget justification that you are not asking for. I don't want to hear that I'm going to also give, I'm going to donate 6 months of my time to this project. No, don't talk about anything that you're not actually asking for. Nobody wants to hear it. I got to give that. So, okay. And they don't want to read it, and it could get you in lots of trouble. So highlight, explain, provide rationale. You want to know what's for everything you're asking for. That should be pretty simple. You're asking for it for a reason, so make sure you're saying it. Justify expenses, not anything else. Watch for your page limitations. Big problem. Some NSF requires 3 pages or less. And you got to know that, because I actually had an 8-page budget justification the other day, and he didn't possibly know how he was going to switch it to 3, but he had to. We strongly recommend, unless your agency specifically says you have to put them in, don't put dollar amounts in your justification, because if it changes, you will forget to change it in your justification, and then your justification won't match your budget. That happen all the time. Be very detailed with certain categories. Foreign travel and consultants. Make sure you're giving detail. They know that you don't know where where 4 years down the line your such and such foreign conference you want to go to, that you don't know where it's at. But at least let them know you're planning to attend it at that time, and that you're assuming it's going to be in, based on past experience, it's going to be in someplace in Europe, and then they'll understand why you can't give them information. But if you just say, I want $3,000 for foreign travel, and that's your justification, it's not going to fly. OSP is going to come back to you, and my office will too. Watch for agency rules on justifying effort. Some agencies, most agencies, want to see it as person months. So you're working 10% on a project. Don't say 10%. Calculate, if I have a 9-month appointment and I'm working 10%, it's 0.9 academic, and then I'm working in the summer 3%, so it's 0.3 person months in the summer. So make sure you're making that distinction. It really makes a difference. I've seen reviewer comments when it wasn't done correctly that nailed people for that. Don't include more effort than what you're budgeting. It gets into an issue of what could be considered cost share. And NSF, if you say, well, I only want a month of effort, but I'm gonna work 2 months on the grant, you're in violation of NSF's rules, and your proposal could be returned without review. So don't talk about that in the budget justification. There's other places you can put it. All right, so we talked about personnel, person months, or in percentage. Make sure you know what your sponsor wants. Numbers may or may not use depending on the sponsor's requirements. We said that before. That's just, some sponsors want to see your numbers in your justification. We hate when those sponsors want that, because we have to double, triple, quadruple check numbers. And now we're on cost sharing quickly. With cost sharing. So cost sharing is when it's the part of the project costs that are paid from sources other than sponsor. So you want to include them only when they're required. So some solicitations will say, you have to provide 20% of the total cost you're asking for in the project as cost share. There's very specific language that will say that, or they'll say a 1-to-1 match, or they'll say a 2-to-1 match, or some ridiculous amount. Yes?
Just trying to make sure that NSF, we say that they don't want a cost share, but there's some solicitations where
Right.
NSF does require cost share, like the major research instrument
Right.
program, etc. There is a required cost share.
Right,
So,
that is true.
So generally they don't want a cost share, but they specify in some
Correct.
solicitations.
So NSF, the point that Shobha made was that NSF typically doesn't want to see anything about cost share anywhere. They just don't. They don't want to see it. It can get your proposal returned without review. But there are solicitations like the Major Research Instrumentation Grant Program and a few others where there's required cost share. So all the more reason you need to make sure you're listening to and keeping an eye on your solicitation. So cost share. So there's two types of cost share. There's cost shares mandatory and voluntary. Okay, these are the two kinds. So mandatory is your sponsor says you have to do it. That's mandatory cost share. And someone has to pay for it. And that all has to get arranged. So if you've got cost share, you better be working with your colleges, your departments, you know, because someone has to pay for it. No one's going to just give it to you. They want to have a good reason for why you need that cost share. So if you're have required cost share, you better be talking to your departments and then probably your colleges, and maybe even they may then take it all the way up to the BPRGS. The other type of cost share is voluntary. That's not required, but oftentimes you'll see people put it in. So this is the situation where I'm doing an NIH grant, and NIH doesn't say I can't do this, but you say, I'm only asking for a month of summer effort, but I'm actually going to also then put in 10% AY effort. That's called voluntary cost share. I've decided that I'm gonna do this, and that has to be documented somewhere. And it has to be, and people have to agree to it. So it needs to be documented, like on your e-transmittal, that there is some kind of cost share, voluntary cost share. And if you're offering your salary, me at the college level is going to want to know that your department's planning on paying for that out of your salary, and that they're not going to be coming back to the college later to say, you said, you know, you approved this, so you must be willing to cover it, because we're not. We don't have the money either. So those are the two kinds. Mandatory, you have to have. And voluntary is not required, but you will see it in some types of proposals. Some it's totally not allowed, like NSF, and others you'll see it. But you have to make sure whatever kind of cost share you have has to be documented somehow, and you have to know who's going to cover it. And people aren't going to sign off on your e-transmittals or your proposals unless they know that, especially if they might potentially have to pay some of that cost share and no one's talked to them. They'll never sign off.
I just want to add something to what Judy just said for voluntary cost share. If it's not required in the RFP, our office is going to talk you out of we want you to remove it.
Because it has to be tracked, and it's another step on the post-award side. There's people who have to keep track of that stuff.
Right. So
you have to keep track of that stuff. It's problematic.
And so what we do is we try to tell you, if you start off saying, I'm going to commit 10% of my time, you can't change midstream and say, I'm going to change it to 5. You got to stick to it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's ways that we have to really make sure that your chair and dean know that you've committed to this and it's not required. And if you read the solicitation, a lot of times it says, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be reviewed favorably because you're doing this. You're only going to put a hardship on yourself.
Yeah. And you have to track it, and you're responsible for it. And the federal government can come in and audit us. And if you haven't tracked it and you don't have it tracked somewhere, then you're in violation. And you could conceivably lose your award or have to pay a penalty.
And we do track it on the post-award side. A lot of you who have grants already, you get an email effort reporting.
It's going on right now.
Yep, you're certifying it.
Yep.
That's what's audited. And they audit every year.
And that's a lot of what we're talking about right there.
So in other words, if it's not required, like Judy said, please do not budget it.
Don't do it. If you want to put a general squishy, what we call a squishy statement that says, PI will provide the necessary effort to ensure successful completion of the project. That's not quantified.
That's right.
It's not quantified, but it's there. That's a statement. I wouldn't make it on an NSF budget justification,
Right.
but any other sponsor, I think you could get away with that. Never seen it come back, and it's not quantified. And if you put a statement like that in, nobody has to track it. It makes everyone's life easier. Okay.
Any questions on cost share before?
And biggest thing, if you've got required cost share, talk to your departments. So our tips are, you make sure you're looking for the requirements. Look for budget caps. Sometimes they tell you you can only have $300,000. Does that include indirect costs or not? Is it total project costs, which includes indirect costs? NSF, it usually is. If it might say just total direct costs, so then your F&A gets put on top of that. That's how NIH usually does it. Are there limits to the F&A? Does it say you can only charge 15%? Is there required travel to meetings? That is often buried, and you need to look for it. Is there required cost share? They should be very clear about that if there is, and you should be starting to work on it right away. Use round numbers. Nobody cares about the dollars and cents. Round your numbers. Start with your salaries. They're going to be the biggest expense you have on your grant, and you're going to get sticker shock when you do that. And then you'll know whether you really can do it the way you want to do it or not. And if you have subawards, you cannot finalize your budget here at MSU without their final budget. So you want to get started with them early. Get moving on that really quickly. Any more questions?
Thank you.
I think that's everything we had.